This video is a history of card games in 5 minutes or less. Card games have been around for a long time. Magic has an entire 30 years of history in which the counterspell started looking like this, and then they changed it to looking like this, and then they changed it to looking like this, and nowadays it looks like this. In the 25 years of Yu-Gi-Oh, we've seen tons of retrains on tons of iconic cards. Karibo started out looking like this, upgraded to looking like this, then he started looking like this, and now we have a Karibo that even looks like this. Hearthstone's been out for a shorter 10 years, but still we started off with Ragnaros looking like this, then he upgraded to look like this, and then you got a diamond version that looks like this, and you can even play him as a hero looking like this. And for the 25 years that Pokemon's been out, we started with Charizard who looks like this, and then he upgraded the Charizard EX looking like this, and then you have the Mega Charizard EX looking like this, and then you finally have the recent Charizard EX that's a Dark type and looks like this. But if you haven't been playing all of these card games for multiple decades, you probably don't understand what the metagames were like back in the day, or if you are just trying to get into it now from a previous thing, it might seem like a totally different game to you. So don't you worry, in this video, I'm going to go over the history briefly of all the different card games so you can get an idea of what each of the card games was like in different eras. So Magic the Gathering comes out in 1993 and establishes two main things that we're going to pay attention to in this video, one of them being keywords and the other one being the different colors. Many of the creatures from these early years become icons of the game and begin representing what each of the colors not only does, but what all the different types of colors mean. 2 mana for a 2/2 becomes called the Grizzly Bear throughout all time because of the Grizzly Bear card printed in Alpha, originally Magic's first set. But the other notable thing about the creatures in Alpha is that almost all of them are completely crap. All the ones that are really good become super iconic, but all the bad ones are cards like Kobolds of Carekeep, which is literally a 0 mana 0/1 that doesn't do anything on its own. This is counteracted in Alpha by the instants and sorceries, which are the spells of the game, which are absolutely super duper powerful and rule the entire game. Spells like Time Walk, Wheel of Fortune, Swords of Plowshares, Dark Ritual all have massive game warping effects, which completely define what your deck is able to do based on not only the colors that you have, but what access you have to different cards and abilities. Swords of Plowshares makes it so that way basically any creature in the game is completely useless compared to a spell because you can pay 1 mana to deal with literally any creature in the whole game. In these early years, flavor matters a lot more than function, making you feel like a powerful wizard rather than actually caring about what the spells actually do. But over the years, more and more times, players want the cards to actually feel powerful in relation to one another rather than just feeling like they are a cool aesthetic thing. This more honed focus on balance becomes more of the job of the design team over the next following years, and the spells, as a result, don't end up moving a lot over the course of the game. The spells will be pretty good, but they'll be generally toned back from the cards that were printed in Alpha, for example. A card like Fact or Fiction is a super powerful draw spell, but is still weaker than the draw spells printed in Alpha, and this would only get continually powered down with a card like Jace's Ingenuity, which allows you to draw 3 cards for 5 mana, compared to the 1 mana you'd be able to do that for in the Alpha set. Whilst the spells got a lot weaker, the creatures ended up getting a lot bigger over the course of the game, giving you more and more reason to play creatures that are able to beat your opponent down. Cards like Tarmogoyf or Wild Nacatl are super powerful creatures for very cheap, allowing you to beat your opponent down at a very fast rate. Because of the increasing power of creatures and the decreasing power of spells, Planeswalkers enter the mix as something that can be actually put into the game in a way that doesn't completely break it. These Planeswalkers, like Liliana or Jace, come down and become more of the icons for what Magic is as a game. These powerful Planeswalkers, which both remove creatures and give you extra value over the course of the game, are very hard to deal with unless you have a large creature base to attack them with. And this leads to Magic having the creatures become even stronger over the course of the years. Cards like Blade Splicer with powerful enter the battlefield abilities allow you to attack Planeswalkers on multiple fronts after you play the card down and it gets removed. Not to mention the cards like Fleece Mainline double as both early game attackers but also as late game threats by having powerful activated abilities that you can use later on in the game. The creatures end up getting more and more powerful to the point where creatures can end up doing almost anything you could possibly want out of any card in the game. Cards which generate infinite value like the Scarab God or Smuggler's Copter here are not only cards that you can play into the late game and let you go on and on for many turns during the game, but they also have keywords which make it harder for you to remove them, making them extremely potent as not only attackers, blockers, value engines, you name it. This is not also to mention the costs on these big powerful beaters from earlier also goes down. A card like Old Growth Troll or Omnath Locus of Creation are both powerful creatures that you can play down, but also have abilities that enter or when they leave the battlefield, meaning that you can get value out of them at basically any point during the entire game, and you can also use them to beat down your opponent in a powerful way. In spite of all the creatures gaining basically entire spells attached to them along with their creature-sized bodies, most of the spells in the game end up staying the same and doing relatively the same thing over the course of the game's life. Recent standard staples like Stock Up or Spell Pierce have been seeing play basically all throughout Standard's lifetime and have basically the same effect of either getting you more cards or countering your opponent's spell for cheap. This leads to a game where not only the spells feel powerful, but there are also unbeatable threats on your side and your opponent's side of the field, which are creatures which come down and basically do anything you could possibly want out of a spell and more. Overlord of the Mistmorse is an absolute control player's dream, being playable as early as turn 4, generating you blockers that help you get to the late game, and also being a late game threat, generating you a massive board all on its own. But Stormchanger's Challenge is the card that to me looks like the absolute most insane card ever conceived. This card is a creature, it's an enchantment, it only costs 1, it does value in the late game, it gets you back extra cards. There is absolutely nothing you could possibly ask out of any blue card in the game that Stormchanger's Challenge doesn't give you. It is completely absurd. Now Yu-Gi-Oh! So Yu-Gi-Oh! Starts out with monsters like the iconic Blue Eyes White Dragon and has different spells and traps like iconic Pot of Greed or Mirror Force. The most notable thing about Yu-Gi-Oh! In these years is that there are absolutely no limits on any of the cards in the game. The only thing that stops you from summoning anything from your hand is the fact that the stars on the monster need to be less than 5 if you want to be able to summon it without tributing another monster, which means that the low tribute monsters, such as Lajin here, become the most powerful monsters in the game by having a really high attack point, being able to sit on the field, and have no cost to put into play. And if you want to know why it's never worth it for you to summon any big monster, it's because all the spells in Yu-Gi-Oh! Are absolutely broken. Mirror Force and Pot of Greed are obvious examples, but they have even weaker cards like Fissure coming out here, killing any monster for basically one spell card, making it not worth it to summon any monster that requires more than a tribute. Not to mention, if you wanted to summon out a big monster, you could just use Monster Reborn to summon literally any monster from any graveyard for no cost at all, making that any monster summoning basically useless in comparison to just using a Monster Reborn. The strongest monsters in these days are the ones with floating effects, like Sangan or Witch of the Black Forest, which allow you to get additional monsters after these monsters die, basically replacing themselves, making it so that way if your opponent removes them with a removal spell, they aren't completely worthless, unlike every other monster in the game at this time. Yu-Gi-Oh! At this time doesn't really have an identity, which is where special summoning comes in, as Yu-Gi-Oh's most defining and key characteristic over the course of the game's entire lifetime. Special summoning is the ability to summon a monster without having to pay any cost associated with it, including your normal summon. This allows Yu-Gi-Oh! To print monsters that are powerful and have cool effects, but don't require you to sacrifice an arm and a leg to bring them out onto the field. The initial incarnation of these cards were the Chaos monsters, featuring Black Luster Soldier Envoy at the beginning and Chaos Emperor Dragon Envoy at the end, which both require you to have a light and a dark monster in your graveyard at the same time, banish them to get a super powerful monster out with a huge effect. Along a similar vein, Dark Armed Dragon would come out, which requires you to have exactly 3 dark monsters in your graveyard and allows you to banish them from your graveyard to destroy cards on your opponent's side of the field. These monsters all allow you to summon a large boss monster that feels super powerful without having to pay a massive cost to play them, and also while preventing you from summoning them on the early turns of the game, winning the game basically immediately. In this way, Yu-Gi-Oh! Would definitely develop more cards along these lines, which feel super duper powerful and like you can do anything without completely breaking the game in half. That being said, these monsters are still super duper powerful, as you could basically summon them at very, very early points in the game and dominate your opponent if your deck was set up correctly, meaning that they needed to introduce new mechanics to allow you to both summon these large boss monsters, but also not make them feel like they completely dominate the game in a super powerful way. The first of these are Synchro Summons, which allow you to put 2 monsters on your field, a tuner and a non-tuner, together and make a super powerful boss monster from your extra deck, which means you will always have access to it, meaning that if you build your deck around the monster, they can make a pretty powerful monster that doesn't completely dominate the game, but is still reliably accessible, making it more of an icon of your deck rather than something that you will hope to draw in every game. They follow this up with XYZ monsters, which are basically just synchros but more generic, only requiring 2 of the same level of monster to be combined into an XYZ monster. They would also help to use this mechanic to help reinvigorate cards like fusion monsters or different ritual monsters, which were other mechanics that were already present in the game but needed some bolstering from new archetypes to be actually playable, as the original ones in base Yu-Gi-Oh! Were very, very bad. In this way, many decks had reliable ways to get to all different types of boss monsters without relying on them being incredibly powerful and dominating the entire game by themselves when played, because you wouldn't have the consistency of being able to draw them all the time. Cards like Fusions, XYZs, and Synchros all sit in your extra deck, and all the different ritual monsters had many more extra ways to summon them, not requiring them to be in your hand all the time to be summoned out. The most confusing of these, however, has to be the pendulum summoning mechanic, which doesn't really follow any of the other elements previously established and tries to make summoning in a different way in the game very interesting by using pendulum summoning with pendulum monsters. This works in a very different way and has a different sort of way to have your resources loop over the course of the game by having cards go to your face-up extra deck, which only existed after these pendulum monsters were introduced, which definitely spiced up the game in a different way, but was very confusing to many players. This leads to the most modern element of the new summoning mechanic, which are link monsters. These monsters are generally generic combo enablers, which require almost nothing to set up and can play in almost any deck. A card like Link Removal only requires you to have a level 1 monster in your deck, which basically any deck can accomplish at very, very little ease. Not to mention cards like Firewall Dragon are super broken combo enablers that combo all by themselves if they have very, very little setup, and because these cards sit in your extra deck, you can almost always access them. This leads to modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Where almost every single card in your entire deck will lead you to some type of combo. If we just look at a modern example of Fiendsmith Engraver, this card not only adds Spell and Trap Fiendsmith cards in your hand, but it can also be summoned from its graveyard by doing different effects and by exiling other light Fiend monsters. Also, this card special summons itself for completely free. This card basically does everything you could want out of one card, and is only one card to a key archetype. Fiendsmith's Requiem allows you to get basically any Fiendsmith monster for your deck and special summon it to the field at a very low cost. All you need is one light Fiend monster, which is easily achievable using a card like Fiendsmith's Tract, which allows you to search your deck for a light Fiend monster and put it in your hand and then discard a card. The card you always discard is Fabled Lure, which is a 1-star light Fiend monster, allowing you to go into Fiendsmith's Requiem as the light Fabled Lure puts itself into play when you discard it. Not to mention that Fiendsmith's Tract also has a graveyard effect, allowing you to fusion summon a fusion monster, such as Fiendsmith's Lacrima, which is a card that you can put into your fusion deck, and because you will very easily have 2 light Fiend monsters after going through all of this process, you can summon Lacrima, deal damage to your opponent, and then also use it to fusion summon additional monsters, going off in your combo from basically having only one card in your hand at the start of the game. Because of the pace of all these plays, functionally traps have been completely removed from the game, and the only traps that can see play are cards that are called hand traps, like Infinite Impermanence here, which allows you to activate it on the first turn of the game before you have set it by playing it down when you have no cards on the field. In this way, hand traps are the only way for you to actually interact with your opponent on the early turns of the game, as your opponent will very easily combo off and set up an unbreakable board on the first turn of the game if you do not interact with them in some meaningful way. Now for Pokemon. So in Pokemon, they started introducing trainers, which are these guys right here, which you can just activate on your turn to do an effect. They have Pokemon, which are obviously the thing you do the battle with, like Charizard, for example, here. And you got Energy, which are basically the energy that you attach to a Pokemon in order to perform attacks against your opponent's Pokemon during your turn. Now in Pokemon, the Pokemon and the energy are only used to attack your opponent's Pokemon to get the prize cards in order to win the game, which means that the trainers have to pick up the slack and do literally everything else in the game, which is why all the trainers in the base set of the Pokemon end up being super duper broken. Cards like Computer Search, which lets you get any card of your deck for the low cost of discarding 2 cards, or Energy Removal, which literally takes one of your opponent's energy and discards it from their Pokemon, are super powerful players and definitely define the early metagame of Pokemon. Because you can't rely on your Pokemon having any energy or basically any power attached to them at any point, the only Stage 2 Pokemon that saw any play is Blastoise, which allows you to attach as many energy as you want to Blastoise or your other Water-type Pokemon from your hand thanks to its Rain Dance ability. And the other Pokemon that end up being strong in the base set are basic Pokemon like Hitmonchan here, which just have a very basic attack and a high amount of HP, meaning that you can have this on the field and attack many times over the course of the game with low energy costs. This also makes it so that way attacks that give you more energy become very, very powerful, such as Mewtwo here, which allows you to attach 2 energy from your discard pile to Mewtwo, allowing it to attack for very, very low energy costs by using energy absorption to power itself up without relying on other cards being played from your hand. As the years went on, the draw power drastically shifted in Pokemon as trainer cards were powered down in general and put restrictions on them, like becoming supporter cards that you could only play once per turn, and the draw power generally shifted to Pokemon on your bench, which would be able to use their Poke powers to draw you cards, such as Delcatty or Claydol. Pokemon like Delcatty, Claydol, or Magnezone here allow you to use their Poke Power once per turn to draw you many cards, allowing you to draw several cards over the course of the game as long as you keep these Pokemon in play. In this way, Pokemon focuses more on being able to redevelop boards over the course of the game rather than having all of your cards go down in one single turn. Pokemon in this time also experiments with a lot of new mechanics that are only introduced in the card game and are not present in the video games whatsoever. Prime cards, like Magnezone for example, are one example of a different mechanic that is only present in the card game. Similarly, Delta species are types of Pokemon which have a different type than they normally would, like a Steel-type Pikachu here, and Holon's Castform is an example of a Holon card that has a special ability and also allows you to tutor from your deck with many Holon-type supporter cards. The biggest hit from these developing years, however, are definitely the multi-prize Pokemon, starting with a card like Mew EX and Mewtwo EX. These cards are super powerful and allow you to perform very big attacks. However, they have the downside of giving your opponent 2 prize cards when they are knocked out. In this way, these Pokemon can have more power because they have more risk associated with them when you put them into play. Pokemon has even retrained EX into GX, and Zoroark GX, as we can see here, is a bit of an example of all the cards. It has a special GX attack that is 1 per game use, which is only present in the card game. It's got 2 prizes given out when you knock it out, and it also has a Poke Power, which allows you to draw additional cards on your turn. This leads to the modern era of Pokemon, where all the Pokemon are almost completely set up by themselves and don't require very much work to put into play at all. The obvious example of this are Pokemon that have really high power attacks for very low energy costs, such as Seismitoad EX here, which stops your opponent from using item cards on their turn and only requires 1 attachment of a double colorless energy to perform the Quaking Punch attack. Similarly, Arceus, Dialga, and Palkia GX Alter Creation attack only requires 1 steel energy, but makes it so that way whenever you knock out any of your opponent's Pokemon, you get an additional prize card. And while this is super powerful for only 1 energy, it also has another attack which uses free energy attachments, which are the most primary way that Pokemon nowadays is played and most common way that Pokemon are super duper powerful in the card game. Ultimate Ray allows you to get 3 basic energy from your deck and attach them to Pokemon in any way you like. Pikachu and Zekrom GX Tag Team also have a full Blix attack, which similarly search your deck for 3 electric energy cards and attach them to one of your Pokemon. These Pokemon attacks allow you to be able to perform many attacks over the course of the game without having to refuel your Pokemon with additional energy, meaning that once you get that attack off, you'll be able to attack your opponent for basically the rest of the game. But the Pokemon from more recent years have Pokemon abilities or powers that allow you to refuel on your energy every single turn of the game, even as early as you bring out the Pokemon. Pokemon like Charizard EX, Gardevoir EX, and Steelmax Ogerpon EX all have Poke Powers which allow you to attach energies to them. Not only this, they are also powerful attackers in their own right, meaning that once you get Charizard EX down, you basically have to do no work to start beating your opponent down with your super powerful Charizard EX. The most overtop example of this is Lugia V-Star's Summoning Star power. Once you use this power, you can get 2 Archeopsis from your graveyard into play, and both of these Pokemon allow you to search your deck for 2 special energy cards and attach them to one of your Pokemon, functionally powering up Lugia V-Star's Tempest Dive attack immediately upon bringing out Lugia. Not only this, because they are 2 separate Pokemon, you can basically power up any single attacker in the entire game at any point once you set up your Lugia V-Star, meaning that there is no need to put any energy into your hand at any point in the entire game as long as you have a Lugia V-Star. So Hearthstone comes out 15 years later after the other main card games have been established, and it has the classes mechanic, which is their way of delegating what cards can be played in what decks. This establishes a feel for every different class in Hearthstone. For example, druids are known for ramping, paladins are known for healing, etc. And you'd think after 15 years of card game experience that the designers of Hearthstone would learn to make the spells a little bit weaker in their base set and make the minions a little bit stronger, but that is definitely not the case. The spells are still super duper broken in the base set of Hearthstone. Cards like Shadow Step allowing you to retrigger any battle cry in your entire deck for a very, very low cost, or a card like Ice Block, which literally just gives you a free turn for 3 mana in mage decks. The most interesting thing, though, is that most of the minions that are good in the base Hearthstone are just stat sticks. Cards like Mountain Giant see a ton of play and are basically just a large body for a low cost. Most of the super duper powerful minions are cards like Edwin Van Cleef, which already rely on spell spam being the main strategy that is involved in Rogue. This card can be really, really big really early in the game. Similarly, the best minion in Classic, in my opinion, is Gadgetzan Auctioneer, originally costing 5 mana and giving you extra cards from spells. Because spells are so good, having a minion that gives you a free spell every time you cast a spell can easily chain into a 40-card turn. The most obvious example of this, one of the best minions to play in Druid, was the Chillwind Yeti, which is literally just a 4-mana 4/5 with no text. This card would absolutely never see play in any card game. In the basic set of Hearthstone, however, this card is the king of the 4-mana slots. One of Hearthstone's main problems in this era is that it doesn't have that much randomness in it. It is way too deterministic, and most of the games end up ending in the same way when your deck does the one thing it's designed to do. One card that is bucking that trend from the base set is Ragnaros the Fire Lord. Ragnaros deals random 8 damage to an enemy minion, meaning that it causes a lot of exciting moments, and they would follow this up in their expansions with cards like Pile of the Shredder, dethroning the previous king of Chillwind Yeti. Over the years, these random effects would culminate in the most random card I've ever seen in a card game, Yogg-Saron Hope's End, which literally casts random spells targeted randomly when you play it down with a random amount based on how many spells you've cast this game, completely upending and being a super powerful card that completely warps any game it is played in. And while this helped vary the options of the things that you were seeing while you were playing the game, they do deck building elements introduced in a lot of the sets, which help you build decks in a different way than you normally would just slamming all the best cards of a class into the deck. Iconic cards like Reno Jackson or Patches the Pirate make you build decks in a way that you wouldn't normally, either adding more pirates or not putting any duplicates into your deck. Previously untouched archetypes like Control Hunter gain new abilities and new powers as new sets are released. For example, Deathstalker Rexxar is a control payoff, which would normally be really great in any other class, but because Build a Beast was given to Hunter, it gives a new control archetype to that deck that otherwise would not have access to that. The Caverns Below is an example of a quest, which is something they have come back to many times, forcing your deck to do something different and starting in your hand, meaning that your deck can do that different thing every game, making an entire new archetype in a class that otherwise wouldn't have one. Baku the Moon Eater and Gin Greymane both require you to have either even or odd only cards in your deck to get an upgrade to your hero power, massively changing the way you design your deck from the baseline because of that upgraded hero power being able to fill in your spots in your curve. But then the most earth-shattering thing happened in 2019 is that the new class got added to Hearthstone, and it became the best deck of all time in Hearthstone without question, which is Original Demon Hunter. Original Demon Hunter had a 5-mana Skull of Gul'dan, which draw 3 cards and reduced the cost of the cards by 3 if it was in the corner of your hand, basically being a negative mana draw spell to put in your deck. Not mention you had Altruist the Outcast, which would combo with these very low-cost cards by dealing damage to your opponent's entire board and their face if you had cards in your left and right of your hand, something very easy to do in the aggressive Demon Hunter deck that was basically tier 0 from the moment it got out and got nerfed on the very first day of its being released. This immense power only daisy-chained to spell-only combos coming out after Demon Hunter was nerfed into the ground. Cards like Refreshing Springwater originally costing 4 mana to give you basically 0 mana to draw 2 cards, and Deck of Lunacy transforming your entire deck of spells into a random deck that costs 3 more, but keeps the original cost, allows you to have an entire deck of random super powerful spells to beat your opponent down with at a massive mana discount. Leading to what is the worst standard metagame ever present in Hearthstone, the turn 6 kill present from the Demon Seed bringing out Blind Tamsin or Sorcerer's Gambit bringing out Archivist Dawngrasp are probably the worst cards that Hearthstone has ever seen print. These cards both played down on turn 5 regularly after you completed their quest lines and then would immediately kill your opponent on the next turn in a massive combo that was almost impossible to interact with. And after that horrifying meta got nerfed into the ground, the build-a-board neutrals came and took over the metagame and are what are presently killing Hearthstone right now, in my opinion. Cards like Reno Lone Ranger got absolutely nerfed into the ground, originally reading that it would destroy your opponent's entire board without triggering any death rattles and limit them to a single spot for one entire turn. Not only this, it only required you to have no duplicates in your deck from when you played Reno, not at the very start of the game. This card has been absolutely nerfed and gutted because it was so powerful at stopping your opponent from doing literally anything. Similarly, the Ceaseless Expanse was massively nerfed, originally being an 100 cost minion, and then was a 15/15 that would destroy all your opponent's minions when it came into play, and would cost less for basically doing anything in the game. Drawing cards, playing cards, destroying cards, anything that would happen over the course of the game will make your Ceaseless Expanse basically cost very little, meaning in fast-paced games, you would play this down early on in the game and get a massive board swing with a 15/15 minion that has now been nerfed massively by 25 mana, probably the biggest nerf any card has ever seen. And from all the learning I've done from these 4 card games, I've noticed a bit of a trend. They're all very similar, but they all do things a little bit differently. They all start out as a game that doesn't know anything that they're doing. They all start with completely broken spells in them, and they don't understand the power of spells in comparison to their creatures or minions or whatever it is their main way to win the game at the beginning of the game. But as all these games develops, they start all forming an identity and becoming something that people can get really attached to and really fall in love with as a game. Planeswalkers in Magic the Gathering, extra deck summoning from Yu-Gi-Oh! EX Pokemon in the Pokemon game, and random effects and massive legendaries from Hearthstone are all things that people can fall in love with and become part and iconic parts of the game that weren't built in there from the beginning and were established over the course of many years of design. These all naturally progress for a long time in the card game, but then are eventually given way to a large amount of power creep, which depends on how many years you play the game. You can decide when this ends up happening, but in general, if you look at people who played games back in the day and compare them to nowadays, all the cards are massively more powerful and do massively different things than what they were initially designed to do in the base sets. Whilst from the very beginning of the set, these are definitely a large upgrade and give you a lot more meat to play when you're playing the card games, they can sometimes feel like a downgrade comparison to the more middling formats that were present in the card games library. Cards that were coming out that were kind of establishing the game as what it was, and these cards which are kind of redefining that as a new era. And while this is all interesting to see, my interest is where the games are going to go from here. After all of this power creep, what is going to happen to all of these games and where are they going to end up at the end of the years? And the answer for that is I don't have any idea what is going to happen to all these card games. Universes Beyond coming to Magic, Master Duel coming out and changing the way Yu-Gi-Oh! Is played forever, Hearthstone having new set after new set coming out with more broken bombs. Who knows what's going to happen? If you want to hear more about the future of card games, I would like it if you were to like and subscribe to my channel because I will keep talking about card games for as long as I can, and there's always new stuff happening in these scenes day by day. So I would absolutely love it if you were to like and subscribe to my channel so that way you can see more about card games just like this. I'm really proud of making it to 20,000 subscribers. Thank you so much. I never really thought I would get this far on my YouTube channel, so the fact that I've made it here and I have a devoted fan base that is willing to comment and like my videos really means a lot to me. Thanks for coming around. I'll see you in the next video.